Harry and Meghan, they have an issue when it comes to their memory and when it comes to the truth.
Harry and I are in the car and he says, okay, well, my grandmother's there, so you're going to meet her. Oh, great. I loved my grandmother. I used to take care of my grandmother. This is great. He goes, right. Do you know how to curtsy? What? Did you know how to curtsy?
And I just thought it was a joke.
I learned it very quickly, right in front of the house. We just practiced and then walked in. And
you and Harry practiced?
Yeah. And Fergie ran out and she said, are you ready? Do you know how to curtsy? I said, oh my goodness, you guys.
And I think she's just got so used to lying that maybe, in my opinion, she believes the lies she tells. I don't know. But either way, she's just been so consistently loose with the truth. This is just another example of it. And you make such a great point with the bowing and the curtsying. They teach you how to do it. And aside from anything else, it's actually not hard to curtsy. You put a foot behind, you bend and nod your head. Honestly, you'd have to be the most uncoordinated person.
Imagine sitting in front of millions of people on one of the biggest TV platforms in the world and telling a story that later starts to unravel. Not tiny mix-ups, not small memory slips. Full, dramatic, emotional accounts that were presented with total confidence, only to be questioned piece by piece. And here's the wild part. She had every opportunity to get it right. Cameras, preparation, advisors, the whole planet watching. These are moments where Meghan Markle shared her version of events on live television, and critics say parts of those stories didn't line up. And when you get to the deeper details, some of the biggest claims begin to look shaky once you check basic facts. Let's start with the "who is Harry" moment. This one isn't tragic. It isn't emotional. It's the kind of claim that made people pause. Meghan said that before meeting Prince Harry, she did no research at all. No Google search, no late-night curiosity scroll, no deep dive into articles. According to her, she asked just one simple question. Is he kind? That's what she wants people to believe. A grown woman, a working actress, someone who understood how public image works in Hollywood, one of the most strategic industries on earth.
Person in the world not to be able to do it.
Complaining about your hard life, and you're so privileged. It's just so weird.
It's ridiculous. She opens her mouth and a lie comes out.
If you could choose one thing for people to know the truth about you, what would that one thing be?
I just want people to know that I'm a real person.
Shut the f*** up.
She just always has a habit of twisting the story to meet whatever her current objective is, that it's like it's hard to take anything that she says at face value because it never seems to check out.
She's just become a parody. I just find her so hilarious. Like, if you sat down to write the character of a woman who'd thrown the royal family under the bus, accused them of racism, you've taken the title but you don't want any of the responsibility, and you swan off to California and make rainbow fruit platters. I mean, she's just a joke.
She wants all of the...
And she didn't spend even 2 minutes looking up one of the most recognizable princes in the world? No curiosity, no background check, just pure innocence. For some viewers, that sounded sweet. For others, it felt unrealistic. Because we're not talking about a private citizen. We're talking about a senior member of one of the most famous royal families on the planet. The idea that someone in the entertainment world wouldn't do even basic research raised eyebrows. Not because it's impossible, but because it feels unlikely. Then people started bringing up context. Longtime acquaintances have said she showed interest in the royal family years earlier. She spoke admiringly about Princess Diana in interviews. There are even old photos of Meghan as a teenager standing outside Buckingham Palace during a trip to London. That image became symbolic. Critics pointed to it and said, that doesn't look like someone who had zero awareness. That looks like someone who understood the history and significance of where she was standing. Now, to be fair, many teenagers visit London landmarks and take photos. That alone doesn't prove anything. But when paired with later statements about never researching Prince Harry,
privileges that go along with an identity, but she doesn't want any of the responsibility. She doesn't want to do any of the work. She wants the tiara. She doesn't want the public service.
Live my life really authentically, make choices authentically. I go back to the authenticity, right? It's what I love. I authentically, organically want to share, but also to be authentic. I wanted to do what felt authentic.
I think we're getting absolutely nothing that's authentic out of it.
Because yes, Harry and Meghan, they told a complete lie about it because they want people to find their narrative to be, how it is. It's constructed. They've made it out to be something that it really wasn't. But the truth is always the best.
You're goddamn right.
I wonder if you could rewrite your public narrative from scratch.
It created tension in the narrative. Viewers began asking, was this really a spontaneous love story with no prior knowledge? Or was it a carefully framed first impression designed to feel relatable and romantic? Because here's the thing, genuinely unaware people usually don't have layers of context. They don't reference historical figures, they don't casually mention long-held admiration, and they usually don't enter one of the most scrutinized institutions in the world without some understanding of what that means. So when she said, "I didn't even Google him," some people heard charm, others heard strategy. And then there's the pantyhose story. This one caught even more attention. Meghan described being required to wear nude stockings that didn't perfectly match her skin tone. She shared it as part of a broader discussion about royal dress codes and expectations. For her, it symbolized feeling constrained and misunderstood. But critics argued that dress codes are common in formal institutions. They pointed out that similar rules have applied to many royal women over the years, including Catherine, Princess of Wales. To them, it sounded less like targeted unfairness and more like traditional protocol. That difference in interpretation is where the debate exploded. Some viewers empathized, saying even small rules can feel heavy when you're under intense public scrutiny. Others felt the story was presented with dramatic weight.
Scratch. Is there anything that you would do differently?
Yes, I would ask people to tell the truth.
It's lie upon lie upon lie.
Meghan Markle and Prince Harry lied.
Kim Kardashian, with a smile on her face, is accusing the Sussexes of lying.
But guess what? She ain't fooling anyone. She ain't fooling me, that's for sure.
Lovely. Thank you, so do you.
Before we get into it,
she's lied about her father, Thomas Markle. She's lied about her sister. She's lied about her mother. She's lied about her career. She's lied to Prince Harry about not knowing who members...
Compared to what they saw as a standard wardrobe guideline. The intensity of the delivery didn't match what they considered the scale of the issue. That's the core pattern people keep circling back to. It's not always about whether an event happened, it's about how it was framed. Was it described as a minor adjustment or as a symbol of something much bigger? When audiences sense exaggeration, even slightly, trust can shift. And once trust shifts, every detail starts getting examined more closely. Public storytelling is powerful, especially when emotions are involved. But when narratives are told on global stages, they invite global fact-checking. And in Meghan's case, some viewers believe the disconnect between presentation and policy created more questions than answers. Then here's where things started looking inconsistent to critics. The same shades she once described as uncomfortable and limiting later appeared in products connected to her own lifestyle branding conversations. Similar tones, similar concept, different framing, and that's when skeptics leaned in. Because when something is presented as symbolic of restriction one day and later reintroduced as stylish and empowering, people notice. From that perspective, it didn't look like oppression. It looked like repositioning. The stockings themselves didn't change. The narrative around them did. And nothing makes audiences more skeptical
about him. And so the only thing that I had asked her when she said she wanted to set us up was, I had one question. I said, well, is he nice? Because if he wasn't kind, it didn't seem like it would make...
Then feeling like a grievance has been repackaged. Real hardship doesn't usually come back as a curated aesthetic. When viewers sense that a story shifts depending on timing or opportunity, trust takes a hit. Then came the secret wedding claim, the one that sent social media into overdrive. Meghan shared that she and Prince Harry exchanged vows privately 3 days before the globally televised royal wedding. The way it was described felt intimate, just the two of them. A quiet garden, the Archbishop of Canterbury present in a deeply personal moment before the spectacle. It sounded romantic, private, meaningful, almost cinematic. But here's the issue. Church ceremonies, especially legally binding ones, don't operate casually. Marriage law isn't flexible because a story sounds beautiful. Weddings require licenses, witnesses, official documentation, specific procedures. That's not emotion, that's legal structure. And according to official clarification later provided, the only legally recognized wedding was the one the entire world watched at St. George's Chapel in Windsor. That clarification mattered because it wasn't a tabloid rumor pushing back. It was a senior church figure explaining that what had been described would not have constituted a lawful marriage ceremony. In other words, whatever private exchange may have occurred emotionally, it wasn't a separate legal wedding. That distinction changed everything. For many viewers, it wasn't about whether the couple shared a personal moment. Couples often exchange private vows. That's normal. The controversy came from how the story was presented. The implication was that the public wedding, watched by millions, was almost secondary, that the real moment happened quietly beforehand. But official records show one legal event, one ceremony, one documented date. And when narratives blur the line between emotional symbolism and legal fact,
a duchess.
No, I don't find, I'm just being myself. So I think probably it was different several years ago where I couldn't be as vocal and I had renewed pantyhose all the time. Let's be honest, that was not very myself. I hadn't seen pantyhose since movies in the 80s when they came in the little egg. That felt a little bit inauthentic, but that's a silly example. But it is an example of when you're able to dress the way you want to dress and you're able to say the things that are true and you're able to show up in the space really organically and authentically. That's being comfortable in your own skin. And that's, of course, had different chapters in my life. But right now, no, I don't feel.
Audiences start questioning other details too. It's not that romance is unbelievable, it's that legal history isn't flexible. Paperwork doesn't bend for poetic storytelling. Then there was the photo controversy involving a birthday celebration hosted by Kris Jenner. A picture surfaced online. Meghan reportedly took issue with it being shared without prior approval. The complaint centered on privacy, on not being asked first. On the surface, that might seem reasonable. Many public figures are protective of how images are distributed, but critics pointed out an apparent contradiction. At the same time, Meghan and Prince Harry had entered into major streaming deals that allowed cameras into deeply personal spaces. Conversations at home, behind-the-scenes footage, carefully produced content shared with a global audience. So the question became, was this about privacy itself or about control over presentation? When a celebrity partners with global platforms to share curated personal moments, but objects strongly to a candid social snapshot, people notice the contrast. The situation escalated publicly when Kim Kardashian addressed it calmly, offering her version of events without dramatic back and forth. There was no heated exchange, no public feud, just a straightforward explanation. And sometimes a simple clarification carries more weight.
The wedding took place on the Saturday in Windsor, Saturday, the 19th of May, 2018. The legal wedding was on Saturday. I signed the wedding certificate, which is a legal document, and I would have committed a serious criminal offense if I signed it.
Birthday party invitation. These two had been trying for so long. Well, I say these two, you know who, had been trying for so long to get into that mix. Kris Jenner decides to include a couple of horrendous pictures of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, one where he looks awkward as hell, clearly drunk. And as soon as they went up, of course, because they look so terrible in so many ways, Harry and Meghan aren't happy about it. And so they do a total reverse ferret and start demanding that Kris Jenner and the Kardashians remove all the...
You know, we were told that it was totally cool to post. And then after it was posted, I think they realized it was Remembrance Day and they didn't want to be seen at a party, even though it's our...
Than a defensive response. What made this pattern stand out to critics wasn't any single incident. It was the recurring theme of presentation versus documentation, emotional framing versus official record, personal interpretation versus public verification. In high-profile situations, perception is everything. But perception can shift quickly when details don't align cleanly. In each case, the dress code discussion, the private wedding narrative, the photo dispute, the debate wasn't only about what happened. It was about how it was described. Was the story amplified? Was context missing? Was symbolism presented as fact? When you step onto global platforms and share deeply personal accounts, you invite scrutiny. That's the trade-off of visibility. And once audiences begin sensing inconsistencies, they don't just question one moment. They start reviewing the entire storyline more carefully.
You make Kate cry.
No.
Was there a situation where she might have cried or she could have cried?
No, the reverse happened. And I don't say that to be disparaging to anyone because it was a really hard week of the wedding and she was upset about something, but she owned it and she apologized.
Is reportedly mortified by claims she made Meghan Markle cry during a wedding feud as a royal expert alleges she's saddened,
According to Kim's explanation, the photo wasn't some surprise leak. She said it was discussed, approved, agreed on by everyone in the room. The understanding was clear about what would be posted. Then the image went live, and suddenly, there was panic. Not because someone crossed a boundary, not because consent was ignored, but because of timing. It happened to fall on Remembrance Day weekend in the UK, and critics felt the optics weren't ideal. That's when the narrative shifted. What had been a shared decision was suddenly framed as a violation. A casual group photo turned into a breach of privacy. A night out became something much heavier. Instead of saying, "We didn't think this through," the tone moved toward blame. That's what raised eyebrows. Because if everyone agreed beforehand, the issue wasn't consent. It was perception. And perception can change fast when headlines start forming. Then came the story about who cried before the royal wedding. This one was delivered with emotion, a soft voice, careful pauses. The claim was that Catherine, Princess of Wales, made Meghan cry during a bridesmaid dress fitting days before the ceremony. It was framed as more than just tension. It was described as hurtful, personal, painful, the kind of moment that lingers. For viewers, it painted a clear picture. One woman in tears, another positioned as cold. The timing of the revelation made it even more powerful. It came during a highly anticipated interview. The world was watching. The details felt intimate, and emotional stories spread quickly. But soon after, a different version began circulating. Reports from royal sources suggested that it was actually Catherine who became upset during that fitting.
I think I even saved my little paper place card that said my name on it. Proof that I was there. And proof that I belonged. Because the truth was, I wasn't sure that I belonged. I was so nervous.
According to those accounts, there was stress on both sides. Understandable given the scale of the wedding. It wasn't a dramatic showdown. It was two women under intense pressure. And reportedly, Catherine later sent flowers and a note in an effort to smooth things over. If that version is accurate, the situation looks far less explosive. Not cruelty, not betrayal, just tension in a high-stakes moment. That's relatable. But relatable doesn't always make global headlines. A simple disagreement doesn't travel the way a betrayal narrative does. What made this incident so debated wasn't just the disagreement, it was the reversal. If tears were reassigned in the public telling, that changes the emotional weight of the story. Once people heard both sides, the narrative felt less clear-cut. It stopped being a single villain versus a single victim. It started looking like a complicated human interaction. And that's where discussions about framing come in. In public relations, the way a story is told can shape how it lives. Remove certain details, highlight others, present the emotional core without the messy context. It becomes cleaner, sharper, easier to share. But if additional context later surfaces, audiences reevaluate everything. Then there was the speech at the One Young World Summit. The event itself is designed to spotlight young leaders from around the globe. Activists, entrepreneurs, community builders. The purpose is to celebrate their impact. When Meghan took the stage, many expected a message focused heavily on the attendees and their work. However, viewers noticed something else. In a relatively short speech, she referenced herself frequently, reportedly dozens of times. Some listeners felt the focus drifted inward rather than outward. Instead of centering entirely on the youth being honored, the speech wove in many personal reflections. Now, personal storytelling can be powerful.
I recall in that interview with Oprah that Meghan Markle basically said that she'd been trapped and had been invisible for 2 months and didn't go anywhere. And more importantly, one document which belonged to her personal passport.
Speakers often connect their experiences to larger themes, but critics felt the balance tipped too far. The summit, in their view, began to feel less like a spotlight on emerging leaders and more like a personal narrative platform. One moment that stood out was when she mentioned keeping her name card from a previous event as proof she belonged in the room. Supporters saw vulnerability, critics saw insecurity. The interpretation depended on perspective, but either way, it sparked conversation. For some watching, that's when a pattern seemed clearer. Events meant to celebrate others occasionally circled back to Meghan's own journey. The applause followed her reflections. The headlines centered on her quotes. The young leaders, the reason for the gathering, faded into the background of the coverage. That doesn't mean the speech lacked positive intent, but perception matters. When audiences feel the spotlight has shifted away from the intended honorees, they react. In high-profile appearances, even subtle shifts in focus are amplified. Across these moments, the photo situation, the bridesmaid fitting, the summit speech, the recurring theme critics point to is narrative control. Who decides how a story is framed? Who shapes the emotional takeaway? And when alternative accounts surface, how does that change the impact? Public life invites scrutiny, especially when stories are delivered on global stages. And once viewers begin spotting inconsistencies or shifts in emphasis, they don't just question one event, they revisit all of them. To critics, the spotlight didn't drift by accident. It stayed fixed in one place. Even when the event clearly had a broader purpose, the focus circled back to one person. That's why people kept talking about it. Not necessarily because of what was said, but because of who everything ultimately revolved around. When a gathering designed to uplift many voices starts to feel centered on just one,
claimed she never went anywhere and didn't have a passport. We all now know her itinerary and the fact that she did travel around in that particular period where she claimed she was trapped. So somebody, somewhere along the line, is
audiences notice. And once they notice, that perception sticks. Then came the passport story. This one was presented as something much bigger than inconvenience. It was framed as confinement. According to Meghan, her passport and identification were taken from her, leaving her unable to move freely. The image painted was powerful. A woman inside palace walls without control over her own travel. But when you compare that claim with publicly documented trips during that same period, questions surface. There were international flights, appearances in multiple cities, visits to places like New York, Amsterdam, Paris, and Toronto. Some alongside Prince Harry, some solo. These weren't hidden excursions uncovered years later. They were photographed, time-stamped, and widely reported at the time. So the contradiction became hard to ignore. A passport is required for international travel. Airports scan documentation. Immigration systems log entries and exits. It's not something that can be bypassed casually. You don't accidentally complete more than a dozen international trips without valid paperwork. That's not how global travel functions. Which leads to an important distinction. Was the passport physically stored by security staff for safekeeping? Something common in high-profile households, while still accessible when needed? Or was the story framed in a way that suggested something far more restrictive than the reality? Because the travel record shows movement, consistent movement. Memory lapses happen. People misremember timelines, but documented travel is concrete. Boarding passes, airport arrivals, official events, those leave records. And when records don't align with the emotional framing, audiences begin to question the presentation. Then there was the claim about protocol training. Meghan described feeling unprepared for royal life. No curtsy lessons, no guidance, no structured introduction to the expectations of the role. It was presented as being dropped into one of the most...
Her etiquette coach, I didn't know she had an etiquette coach, but she did, and they taught her the ropes before she met the Queen. Well, they're not too happy because he points out that she squandered a great opportunity to be part of the royal family, cost Harry his opportunity to really serve in the family, but also he taught her all those things that she claimed to be ignorant of. What the coach here claims contradicts Meghan's claims that she didn't know royal protocol and it was all just a mystery to her and just so bizarre.
Yeah. Oh, how do you curtsy? Like ridiculously insulting display.
Like this.
Scrutinized institutions in the world without support. However, reports indicate that an etiquette and protocol advisor was formally assigned to assist her. Not informally, not vaguely. A documented professional whose role was to prepare her step by step. Royal protocol training isn't improvised, it's structured. There are briefings, schedules, rehearsals. So when the narrative suggested total abandonment, it conflicted with documented preparation efforts. The existence of a coach doesn't guarantee someone will feel fully comfortable. Adjustment is personal, but it does challenge the idea that no help was provided at all. That's where perception shifts again. There's a difference between saying, I struggled despite having support, and saying, I had no support whatsoever. The first feels human. The second invites fact-checking. Next came the claim of social isolation, that royal life cut her off from friends and normal activities. According to her description, it felt like confinement. No spontaneous outings, no freedom to move casually. Yet photographs and reports from that period show grocery runs, lunch outings, and visits to various locations. Nothing extreme, just ordinary activities. Palace insiders later suggested that some of the reduced social interaction may have been self-imposed, part of adapting to intense media scrutiny. There's a meaningful difference between institutional restriction and personal choice. When you frame something as enforced isolation, but...
Edmund Fry is in Pasadena, California. He's right out here and lives down the street from us and lived down the street from Meghan. And I went and interviewed him not too long ago. And he actually has we'll show you the space where Meghan sat. And he taught her to have tea with the Queen. He said he's appalled by Meghan's behavior.
Evidence suggests flexibility. The narrative becomes harder to defend. And then there was the nursery heater incident. Meghan described a frightening moment involving a heater issue in Archie's room during a tour. She shared it as a deeply distressing experience, emphasizing the emotional impact and the expectation that she continue with public engagements afterward. The intensity of the retelling drew strong reactions. However, there were no publicly available emergency service reports or official documentation describing a major fire incident. Some reports characterized it as a malfunctioning heater that was addressed quickly without escalation. Emergencies typically generate documentation, especially in high-security residences, incident logs, staff reports, security briefings. When those details aren't publicly corroborated, skepticism grows. Not necessarily about whether something concerning happened, but about the scale at which it was presented. Across all these examples, critics point to a recurring theme: escalation. Minor protocol issues framed as personal oppression. Administrative procedures presented as control. A heater malfunction described with dramatic intensity. That doesn't mean emotions weren't real. Stress under global scrutiny is real. Adjustment challenges are real. But when stories are told on platforms reaching millions, they are inevitably measured against documentation and timelines. And when records don't clearly support the framing, audiences begin to reassess the entire narrative. Not because they dismiss feelings, but because facts matter. Public storytelling carries weight. And once trust begins to erode, every new claim is examined more closely than the last. That's not someone quietly sharing hard truth. To critics, that looks like a performance without documentation to back it up.
In this speech to women and girls, and we finish the engagement, we get in the car and they say, there's been a fire at the residence. What? There's been a fire in the baby's room. What?
Stop.
God, I can't believe we haven't talked about this. Be sleeping in there. And we came back. And of course, as a mother, you go, oh my God, what just, everyone's in tears. Everyone's shaken. And what did we have to do? Go out and do another official engagement. I said, this doesn't make any sense. Can you just...
How did you not bring him?
I was like, can you just tell people what happened? And so much, I think, optically, the focus ends up being on how it looks instead of how it...
Take the security claim. It was framed as betrayal, not a policy shift, not a structural rule, a personal punishment. According to Meghan, protection was removed at the moment she needed it most, like it was ripped away out of spite. That's how it was delivered. Emotional, sharp, dramatic. But the policy itself isn't complicated. Taxpayer-funded security in the UK is tied to active working royal status. When senior royals perform official duties, protection is provided. When they step away from those duties, the public funding tied to that role ends. That's not targeted. That's structural. It's the same framework that applies across the board. Security didn't disappear randomly. The couple publicly announced they were stepping back from senior royal duties. Once that decision was finalized, the publicly funded protection connected to that role ended. They were free to arrange private security, which they did. That's not abandonment. That's how institutional roles work. Benefits follow the job. When the job ends, so do the associated provisions. The narrative of being stripped sounds dramatic. The reality sounds procedural. And those are two very different things. Then there's the claim about Archie's title and the allegation of racism. This was one of the most explosive moments. Meghan said there were conversations about how dark her unborn child's skin might be and suggested that this was connected to him not receiving a title. That's a serious accusation. It landed hard. But royal titles don't operate on emotion or internal discussion.
They wanted to know how brown the baby was gonna be. They're so racist. They wanted to know how brown the baby's gonna be. I'm like, that's not racist. Because even black people wanna know how brown the baby goes.
How they could expect that after all of this time, we would still just be silent if there is an active role that the firm is playing in perpetuating.
They follow established rules. Specifically, guidelines formalized in 1917 limit automatic prince or princess titles to the monarch's grandchildren. When Archie was born, his grandfather was not yet king. That meant he didn't automatically qualify under the existing structure. When King Charles later ascended the throne, Archie became eligible under that same rule. The title followed the law as written. No emergency changes, no sudden reversal, just the structure functioning as it always had. That doesn't erase the emotional weight of what was described, but it does introduce context. The timing of eligibility was constitutional, not spontaneous. And when constitutional rules are left out of the explanation, the public fills in the blanks with the most dramatic interpretation available. Next came the claim of being silenced. Meghan described feeling restricted, controlled, and muted by the firm. The framing suggested total censorship. But during that period, she guest-edited British Vogue, completed dozens of official engagements, gave interviews to major broadcasters, and appeared on global stages. That doesn't look like invisibility. It looks like access. Extraordinary access. Being part of one of the most watched institutions in the world means communication often runs through structured channels. That can feel limiting, but it isn't the same as being voiceless. There's a difference between not being able to say anything at any time without coordination and being fully silenced. One is protocol, the other is suppression. The distinction matters. Then there's the situation involving her father and the media coverage before the wedding. It was described as a targeted release designed to cause maximum harm at the worst possible moment. The implication was deliberate timing. However, media outlets stated that delays in publication were tied to verification processes, confirming sources and checking facts before running a story. In journalism, verification can take time. Not every delay is a strategy. Sometimes it's simply procedure. And when you step back and look at all of it together, a pattern emerges. Dramatic framing, emotional delivery, massive platform, then documentation, policies, timelines, legal structures. The most striking part isn't any single disagreement. It's how often official records and procedural rules provided alternative explanations without needing dramatic counterattacks. There were no fiery rebuttal tours from the palace. No extended public battles, just established systems operating as they were written long before any of these interviews took place. When narratives collide with paperwork, the paperwork doesn't shout, it just exists. Laws written decades earlier don't bend because a story is compelling. Security policies don't shift because the optics are painful. Title eligibility doesn't accelerate because the world is watching. That's where the debate really lives, in the space between emotional storytelling and institutional structure. Some viewers connect deeply with the personal accounts. Others focus on documentation and rules. Both perspectives circulate. But once audiences begin comparing narrative with record, they start noticing inconsistencies. And that's the core tension running through all of this. Was it misunderstanding, reframing, escalation, or simply the clash between personal experience and procedural reality? Now I want to hear from you. Which moment stood out the most? The security issue? The title timeline? The claim of being silenced? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you've been following the pattern and spotting the contradictions as they unfolded, hit like, subscribe, and share this video with someone who's been debating these points. And I'll see you on the next one.